All right, good evening, my friends. It's 6:30. I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited that we've got this Zoom training going statewide. This is a relatively new experience for the ACLU of Wisconsin and our allies across the state in this opportunity. We're going to learn why the Supreme Court election is so crucial and some of the most effective ways for us to talk to our friends and our relatives about voting in the upcoming April 2nd election. We're also going to learn how to phone bank from the comfort of your own home and to encourage other Wisconsinites around the state to vote in the upcoming election. You'll notice most of you are muted or will be muted by our host. There'll be opportunities for questions at the end when you'll be unmuted. And it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. We have Asma Kadri-Keeler, a staff attorney with the ACLU of Wisconsin. We have Rick Banks, Political Director for Black Leaders Organizing for Communities. And we have Deirdre Shannon, Senior Regional Field Director for the ACLU National Office. So right now we're going to turn it over to Asma Kadri-Keeler, who's going to give us a synopsis of why the Supreme Court is so important in Wisconsin.
Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. Talking through some headphones and also in the corner of my couch. I'm very pregnant, so thank you for bearing with me. If you see any weird faces, that's what's going on. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about things that might be intuitive but are important to consider when we're talking about electing a Supreme Court justice here in Wisconsin. So on Tuesday, April 2nd, voters will help choose our next Wisconsin Supreme Court justice, and the two candidates are Brian Hagdorn and Lisa Neubauer. Both are already judges, but it's important to know that Wisconsin Supreme Court justices serve 10-year terms in our state. It's the longest term of any elected official in Wisconsin, and as we know, a lot can happen in a period of 10 years, both legally and socially. Excuse me. The Wisconsin Supreme Court justices regularly tackle issues of social concern, and we hear a lot about it in the news and, comes up in a lot of different ways. But it's really important to consider the impact that 10-year term can have on those issues that come before the justices. So justices, as we know, come to the bench with different perspectives. And what that means is they'll have different ideas on what state laws and constitutional provisions mean. So when they're tasked with interpreting those and they come before them, it's really important to consider the perspective a justice might have when being appointed to the bench. This is why I think it's intuitive that voters choosing who sits on the Wisconsin Supreme Court can make a really big difference and impact in our state and how we move forward. So I don't have to tell you guys that the Wisconsin Supreme Court has a lot of power, but at its base, it's important to know that the Supreme Court will decide what Wisconsin laws, state laws, and the Wisconsin Constitution means and how they are to be applied in lower courts. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing out of all of the understanding that we have of our court system, I think that gets missed in our conversation about courts and judges, is that the vast majority of most lawsuits actually happen in state court and not in federal court. Most of our media attention focuses on the federal courts because they have broader scale impact, they have nationwide injunctions, things like that. But the issues that affect everyday people regularly come through the state court system. So since the Supreme Court is the highest state court in Wisconsin, it means that most issues will ultimately be decided at the Wisconsin Supreme Court that will affect all of us. It's usually the last step in deciding people's rights, and it binds the lower courts in its decision-making as it decides those individual rights. Wisconsin Supreme Court justices can strike down state laws that they find unconstitutional, and they can decide if local judges have made the right decisions. So some examples on what this court can and will rule on in the future are all issues of criminal law. Those are state law matters. So it's important to consider what a Wisconsin Supreme Court justice might think about with their perspective on criminal law issues, because those will filter through the state court system. And anything that relates to the Wisconsin state constitution is up for grabs in terms of interpretation and application. So that includes constitutional issues that arise from the Constitution, but also from state statute, which is drafted and created by our legislature. This can include LGBT issues, reproductive rights, police practices, voting rights, open records law, and most recently, the legitimacy of the lame duck session laws would be up for consideration by the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So one final point I think that's worth making about why this election is important is a lot of our narrative about judges and about courts focuses on the United States Supreme Court. Most people feel that because the Supreme Court has this, very popular partisan sort of view, that it's important to think about what those justices are doing, the decisions that they're making, and how those decisions might impact the states. But it's really important to note that issues decided in a state Supreme Court exclusively based on state law grounds can't be affected by the United States Supreme Court. These are principles of federalism that date back to the founding of our Constitution, and it's important to really realize that the Wisconsin State Supreme Court can and regularly does make decisions about the way that Wisconsinites will be affected that the United States Supreme Court has no say in.
Thank you, Esma. That was fantastic, and it's very informative. I also neglected to introduce myself properly earlier. Although it says it's Molly Collins, I'm really Emilio DeTore, ACLU Wisconsin's Director of Community Engagement. So for those of you that know me and are blowing up my phone with cell texts, I apologize. Now we're going to turn over the comms to Rick Banks, Political Director of Black Leaders Organizing for Communities. And Rick is going to discuss the importance of voting and why it's so vital we encourage friends and families to vote in this upcoming election.
Good evening, everybody. So as Emilio said, a political director with Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, and we've been engaging residents in our communities around voting in elections for really just throughout 2018, and we've had a great effect, we feel like, on the turnout in Milwaukee County and Milwaukee in general. And so this election is particularly important because it's a spring election. Turnout for spring elections are typically much lower than they are for presidential and midterm elections. The last election only had about, I think, close to 1 million people vote. And so when you think about how that's like a third of the presidential turnout typically, and maybe a little bit less than that for the midterms, every vote really counts a lot more. And so when it comes to engaging people, people are most impacted by being spoken to by people that they know, family and friends. Tell them that there's an election coming up. With us, it's people from our communities that go out and talk to the people, our neighbors, about the importance of voting, because like the previous speaker said, the impact is so huge on our communities. And so that's why I think it's very important that, we get out, we reach out to our networks, we talk to our friends and family, and making sure that everybody knows about the election, because, we're only on our second day of door knocking for this election. And already there's a lot of people who are saying that they don't even know that there's an election coming up. It's 2019. It's not a year that people typically associate with elections, let alone such a big election such as the state Supreme Court race. So that's why it's very important that we get out. We let people know that there is an election. This is not an off election year, and that it's very important that we get out to vote, because every vote counts, even more so than it does in midterms, than it does in presidential elections. Wow, that's really quick.
Thank you, Rick. That's super important, and certainly Block has been recognized nationwide for their tremendous efforts in turning out the vote. And I'm glad you were able to underscore why we all need to vote in this upcoming election. With that, I'd also like to turn it over to Deirdre Shannon, who's going to train participants in remote phone banking so that we can learn what we need to do in order to call folks and encourage them to vote. Deirdre?
Thanks, Emilio. Hi, everyone. I'm pleased to meet you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some best practices and do's and don'ts for phone banking when we're reaching out to voters. Our goal for this campaign is to ensure that Wisconsin voters who care about important civil liberties issues in Wisconsin, like criminal justice reform, voting rights, and reproductive rights, know about the upcoming Supreme Court election and are prepared to show up and vote. We'll be calling ACLU members and supporters and other voters in Wisconsin to remind them about the election and its importance to civil liberties issues and help them make a plan to vote. We know that these calls work. A good conversation on the phone is one of the most effective tools we have for getting voters to the polls. Given how important this election is to civil liberties, and we've heard a lot about that already tonight, we want to make sure that ACLU members and supporters and other supporters of civil liberties across the state make their voices heard and show up to the polls. So today, we'll talk a little bit about the elements of our script that make a conversation with a voter most effective and some best practices for phone banking. First, we're going to identify the elements of a call script that we include in that script because we know it will make it more likely that a voter will actually show up to the polls. When you log into the virtual phone bank system to make calls, you'll be provided with a script. You should take some time to read the script and become familiar with it so that you'll feel more comfortable when you start your calls, and your conversations will feel more personal and conversational. If there's somebody at home with you, you might want to recruit them to practice a few conversations with you before you start. As you read the script, keep an eye out for a few things that are included to make your conversations with voters easier and more effective. First, you'll want to establish a sense of urgency by talking about what's at stake in this election. You'll notice phrases like the election for Wisconsin's next Supreme Court justice is one of the most important elections that will occur in 2019. You can communicate the urgency and the importance of the election. It's more likely that the voter you're talking to will actually go out and cast their ballot. Second, include some friendly and positive social pressure. You can do that by mentioning that you think turnout will be high or that you hear a lot of folks in the community will be showing up to vote that year. You can also mention that we'll follow up after the election to ask them how voting went. People like to do things that other people are also doing, so it's important to emphasize that lots of folks in the community are paying attention and that voting is something that lots of people enjoy doing. Third, make a hard ask. A direct, confident, and specific ask is more effective than one that's a little wishy-washy. So use phrases like, can we count on you to vote? Finally, help them make a plan to show up to the polls. Prompt them to actually think through their day and their schedules in the next couple of weeks and picture voting as a part of their schedule. So you'll see language like, do you typically vote in the morning or the afternoon? Do you have a friend that can go with you to the polls? Are you planning on driving or walking to your polling place? Including language like this helps people actually build voting into their schedules, which we all know when we've had an errand to run makes it more likely that they'll actually show up to do it. Finally, we've got some tips and tricks from our most experienced call team volunteers across the country to help you get started successfully. First, always remember to smile when you're talking on the phone. People can hear it in your voice when you're smiling, and they'll be much more excited to talk to you. Second, engage with the person and make it personal. You're talking to real people over the phone. You yourself are a real person. Ask how people are doing today. Ask them a little bit about what they care about. People who engage with you in conversation and see you as a real person that they like and want to have a conversation with are much more likely to listen to what you have to say and respond to it. Next, invite some friends over to phone bank. If you're phone banking in your house, if you can bring a couple of friends along with you and do it together, it makes it a lot more fun. Next, set reasonable expectations for yourself. You're going to get some voicemails, some busy signals, and even some folks who don't wish to engage with you. This is totally normal. Your overall goal is to have as many really good conversations as you can. So the more phone banking you do and the more calls you make, the more people you'll reach and the more of those good conversations you'll be able to have. Just let the voicemails and busy signals and not home slide off your back and move on to the next one. Next, don't worry too much about the reactions of people that you call. Think about phone banking as an interaction in which both people know kind of the rules of the road. Some folks are going to kind of choose to play along and some might not. Whether or not the person engages is not a reflection of you, and your goal is just to have as many good conversations as possible. Always take the high road and stay positive, regardless of the tone used by the other person. If you're not comfortable conversing with somebody due to their tone or their attitude, that's totally okay. Politely end the conversation and move on to the next one. We don't have to debate with the folks that we call, and you shouldn't argue with the people you call. It's not a good use of your time. Remember, your goal is to have good, positive conversations with as many voters as you can. So if somebody is being rude or argumentative, just smile, thank them politely, and move on to the next call. We're also not in a position to make claims about the ACLU stance on a given issue or policy. So if you ever encounter somebody who asks you a lot of detailed questions about a specific policy and you're not sure, just say, I'm so sorry, I'm a volunteer, I'm not sure. But you should go to the ACLU of Wisconsin website and check out more information. On that note, you should stay nonpartisan. Please don't mention specific candidates or claim that the ACLU is endorsing a specific candidate. We are not, and we cannot. We're here to make sure that people know about an important election, know that civil liberties are at stake, and turn out to a vote. We're not here to talk about specific candidates. Be confident. Try not to rush through your script. Speak clearly. You've got it. Just go into it with a smile and you'll be great. And finally, the most important tip, be proud of yourself. You're helping the ACLU of Wisconsin defend and protect civil rights and liberties. Give yourself a pat on the back after every shift. You deserve it. I hope you're all ready and eager to make calls. After this webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to register for remote phone banking. From there, all you need to do is connect with the ACLU of Wisconsin to get started. A couple of notes on the system we're using. We're going to be using at some points a predictive dialer system. What that means is that the system automatically connects you to people who've already picked up the phone. You don't have to worry about dialing every number, and you'll get fewer disconnected numbers and people who aren't home. That means you'll have more of those meaningful conversations that are really your goal. When you're using the predictive dialer, there are a few things to remember. First, don't hang up the phone between calls. The system will disconnect the call for you once you've entered your results and you've clicked next. It's going to feel a little weird the first couple of times you do it. Just stay on the line. Next, you'll hear a tone when somebody's actually on the line. Once you hear that tone, just start talking. It's, again, going to feel a little unnatural, but what the person on the other end has heard is a prompt, and they've already answered the phone and said hello. So to them, it'll just sound like you were there the whole time and you're just picking up the conversation. So remember, once you hear the tone, just start talking. Finally, remember to always enter the results of your call on the screen and press next. This will disconnect the current call and move you to the next one, and it will let us know how your conversation went so we can follow up with that voter in the future. If you have any additional questions on how to use the remote phone banking system or how to make an effective phone call, please reach out to the ACLU of Wisconsin. We're all super excited to help you out. And thank you all again for your work in support of defending and advancing civil rights in Wisconsin.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Asma. It was really informative. And I was laughing when you said it's important to remember to smile. I watched these 50, 60 people on the screen almost instinctively all smile as you said that. When we do that in our phone banks and we run through the trainings, it's great to see people practice smiling and speaking one another to test out whether or not that theory is correct. And it is. So we're happy to take some questions now. If you have a question, you can signal in the Zoom group chat to the side that you'd like to ask a question, and Molly1 will unmute you and you can ask that question. I'm happy to answer it or direct it to one of our great distinguished panelists, Asma, Rick, or Deirdre to answer that. So fire away.
I think people can also unmute themselves. They should be able to unmute themselves.
Well, that's great. I have 3 children practicing violin, so I'm going to mute my phone while you all speak.
So hi, this is Anita in Wisconsin, and just wondering how this phone banking is being recorded and what the target audience is. So we are with the DPW doing the same thing with canvassing and phone banking, but it will be likely progressive voters as opposed to other. What is the target audience that we'll be reaching out to?
It's a great question, Anita. Unlike the DPW, we're nonpartisan, and we're working specifically off lists of folks that are either card-carrying ACLU members or have registered on lists to volunteer, be active with the ACLU. So we've got our own van, not unlike probably what you all use, and we'll be calling through for people that have selected in that they want to keep informed on issues such as this. What's nice too is although you can come in and some folks may choose to run phone banks with their groups, and I see a lot of friends on line here, so I'm going to pick on a couple of people, but Julia, for example, in the Madison area, Gary up in the Appleton area have run like phone bank get-togethers where people will come to a central location. You can gather around and meet some kindred spirits. We do them in the ACLU offices, so folks in the Milwaukee area are welcome to join us. And also you can do them from home in ones or twos, or like Deirdre suggested, grab a friend and you follow through. You can automatically or manually dial people that'll come up on your screen. It'll give a list and you'll see their name and usually their location. We've created lists internally, so they'll just pop up and you can call them, or you can use the auto dialer, which is a little weird in the beginning, but you get the hang of it. It's really fast and you can speak directly to people, and it's a lot of fun. I find it more exciting than the manual one. You can tell from my accent, I'm a high-paced New Yorker.
One other nice thing about the list that we're calling is it is ACLU members and supporters, and so they tend to be folks who are civil libertarians and really care deeply about these issues. But the funny thing is, like, still a lot of them don't vote in this election, as Rick mentioned. So we noticed during the 2018 election that about I want to say about 60% of our members weren't voting in this election. And so we really wanted to make sure that they got the message, they knew the election was happening, and they could get out there and fight for civil liberties and civil rights.
So this is Anita again. What are the dates of the phone banking? What are we thinking in terms of the window?
We will be doing phone banking just ongoing. People can do it on your own time. We'll have it turned on during specific hours, so between noon and 8 p.m. We don't want to call anybody too early or too late, but it will really be available to you. We will just send out a link in the next day or two after the call so that you will have all the information, and as you want to engage with it, you can just do it on your own.
All right, that sounds great. Are we emphasizing early voting?
We are emphasizing early voting, and yes, that's absolutely something that we would like to, that's in our script already. It differs a little bit by municipality, so if people have questions about when they can vote early, they will have to look that up, or you could help them find that answer for them, but it's not as easy as just saying what the city of Milwaukee's hours are, or Madison's hours are. I noticed there's a question in the chat that I just want to address, but yes, you can use cell phones. You don't need a landline to do the remote phone bank.
And also I want to emphasize a point that Rick brought up as well. A lot of folks don't know that this election is coming up. And as Molly indicated, we have some 60% of our own ACLU card-carrying members who don't turn out to vote for this regularly. So the list we're working on are almost 40,000 Wisconsin residents. So there's a heavy lift, and we need all of your help, and we need you to reach out and grab friends that are interested in making some phone calls. We've had very shy, self-described introverted people come in a little nervous, anxious. They wanted to do it with somebody initially to see what it was like, and so that they could feel, get some feedback to hear if they were doing the right thing. And they loved it because unlike Zoom, the other person doesn't see your face. You're speaking on the phone, and you can be whoever you want. And it's a fun experience.
Another question that was just raised in the chat is, are we sure that the same person is not receiving multiple calls? The answer is, as far as we are concerned, they aren't, but they might be on somebody else's list, so they might not. So like once we get in touch with them, we won't call them again. But if they're on the League of Conservation Voters web or call list, they might get a call from the league as well.
That's a good question. So the phone bank and the van that we use is it's very simple. It's got a nice, well, not super nice, but a good graphic user interface, and it's automated. So you'll click, or you read through the script like Deirdre mentioned, and you'll click that you made the ask, you'll click that you spoke to a human, or you click that you left a message, or you click that it was a deadline. And there's an opportunity to make a notation there as well. So there's notes, and you could type little things in there. And so it'll prevent us from calling the same person twice. If, for example, Usma calls Mel and gets through to Mel, and Mel says, you're right, you can count on me to vote, this is important, then that's clicked, and then we won't call Mel again. But if Mel is an activist, or Gavin's an activist, and they're on a bunch of different lists, other people may call them. And sometimes you get somebody who might be a bit rude, like, oh my gosh, Block called me, and now you're calling me, and there's other people called me. I just say, I'm so sorry. Just let that emphasize how important it is that you vote.
There's a question about whether or not the online dialer is a robo-dialer. I actually don't know the answer to that. Deirdre, do you know if that's blocked in the same way? I don't think it is, but I'm not sure about the answer.
I can't speak to whether it's blocked. It's not a robocall because you are a live person in conducting the call on the other end.
It's not a robocall. What it does is it automatically calls to see who picks up on the other end, and then you're a live call, so it's not a robocaller. But interestingly, you will get people who have a safety or security subscription, and they'll say, please dial the following number in order to be put through to me. And then so sometimes you'll have to manually dial 1, 2, 3, 4. And I see also that there are a couple of other questions here. We do leave messages. So Anita, you're right. A lot of people don't answer a strange phone call calling. And we do encourage people to leave a message. And it's very friendly. I would say, hi, I'm Emilio calling on behalf of the ACLU. Just want to leave you an important message that X, Y, and Z. And the easy part about this for all of us is we've got a script. So we work on the script. A lot of eyes go on the script. We try to have important information, and then we try to put it into plain English so that it doesn't sound stunted. And you may find that you're modifying contractions or whatever to make it sound like your own speaking. And whatever sounds comfortable for you. The facts are important, sticking to the script is important, but modifying it that little bit to customize it for yourself is an easy matter. And we do leave a message, and there's usually a little 2 or 3 line message that's scripted out as well. And you'll have our contact information, so if you have questions on the fly, you can shoot us a message. There'll always be somebody from the ACLU that you can connect with, either through email or shooting us a tweet, or one of the phone numbers we have. Generally, it'll be me, Emilio, or Jared English, our senior field organizer, who will answer those questions for you.
There's another question about texting opportunities. We won't be doing that out of our office. If that's something that you're interested in, I don't know if Block is doing any of that. Rick, do you know if you all are doing texting? Yeah, there are some partners that are, so I could try to connect you with someone who is using that mechanism. But we don't have all the opt-in for all of our members, so we would need to get folks to opt into all of those texts. And so that's not a thing we're doing right now.
Sometimes those who've opted in via People Power, Deirdre will work with the national ACLU to send some updates. So there's a smaller fraction of people who may get those texts. And just as a point of follow-up, we will certainly share, we had some 200 people respond online via People Power alone that they were interested in this, and over 50 calling in. We're going to make sure that our contact information is shared with all of you, as well as the contact information from Block. So if you're interested in supporting the efforts they do, if you're interested in volunteering, if you're interested in making a donation to Block, all that information will be there so that you can support them in the great work they do. It's, this is a team effort, and we're doing a lot across the state, and it's very important that we as ACLU supporters also elevate our partners, especially Block. And I just have a little, we'll answer a couple more questions and then I'll share some more info at the end. Okay, there you go. I'll share the info now. So in a day or two, we're going to send you an email and an invite so that you can do the remote phone banking that Deirdre described. We also want to make sure that you all know that the ACLU and our partners about whom we spoke, Block, Wisconsin Voices, Wisconsin Public Education Network, Citizen Action, Wild are working statewide. We're ready right now to be a voice in the 2019 to 2021 budget debates. And we want all of you to be a part of this work as well. Governor Evers' budget is going to be released on Thursday, but the conversation about what's happening in the budget is really going to take place in the legislature's Joint Finance Committee. The problem is that people are not experienced with knowing who to go to, where to go to, what is it like to speak in front of a committee, where even is this going to occur? And they generally announce where these hearings occur at the last moment. So what we've done with our allies is we've divided the state up into quarters. You'll see the slide Molly, the real Molly, has put up on your screens. The northeast corner in Corcona, there'll be a training on March 2nd this weekend. Please come to it. I'll be there. There'll be a Middleton training on March 3rd. I'll be there as well. There'll be an Eau Claire training March 9th. I will not be there the day before I turn 50. And I'll be tired from running from Corcona to Middleton. And then the Milwaukee training, which is going to be huge because the 85 young people that came to our February training will be at this one as well with the adults. I'll be there with a lot of our friends on March 10th. And so we want you to be a part of these trainings so that we know how to tell our story and how to tell the reps and the senators and the Joint Finance Committee what we, their constituents, want out of the next Wisconsin budget. We don't want them to just write their own document planning what to do with our money, but without our input. It's really important that we have a moral state budget. So if you're interested in joining up with folks from all around the state, in our previous trainings where we were training folks like yourselves to be facilitators for this budget training. So literally 25 people in the Eau Claire area, 25 people in the Middleton area, 25 people in Corcona area, and the combined 100 or so people in the Milwaukee area got together, spent the afternoon figuring out what this looks like and learning how to tell our unique stories about what was important to us so that we could stand up at a Joint Finance Committee and share this. We'll be coming together on the dates you see here. All you have to do is go to the following URL to register, and it's a bit.ly. So you just type into your URL bar, you type in bit.ly, and it's case specific, /WI, so it's capital WI for Wisconsin, capital BUDGET. Sounds complicated, it's not. It's just bit.ly/Wisconsin budget, but it's abbreviated capital WI, capital BUDGET. We'll email all of that to you. I see some of you are taking notes, and thank you for that. We will email a synopsis with all our contact information in the hopes of seeing you engaged statewide on March 2nd, 3rd, 9th, or 10th, depending on where you are regionally.
And I also pasted that link in the chat if anybody just wants to copy and paste it out of the chat.
Oh, that's great. You can copy and paste that. You can tag that if you're following us on Facebook or Twitter. You can join that there. We encourage all of you. This isn't a secret. Like, our civic engagement depends on us getting our neighbors and friends to do just that, get engaged. So please share that. Invite folks to get active. Please come to these trainings. We're looking forward to a robust turnout in the four corners of Wisconsin. We'll have free food. Another cool thing we're doing, since the governor can only do so much, is when we meet about the budget, we're all going to be wearing similar colored t-shirts. So if somebody from Wisconsin Public Education Network or somebody that's talking about ending mass incarceration with the ACLU stands up, we will all stand up to show support for the person addressing the Joint Finance Committee. This sends a powerful message, and this shows one another that we all care and that, you know, we're in it to win it together, regardless of what our message is. And that also prevents the narrative from being twisted. So again, I thank all of you for taking a portion of your evening to come here. I want to thank our presenters, Asma, Deirdre, Rick, and Molly, for spending the evening with us from the relative comfort of our homes. And you can see, I'm already eyeballing some of the books on your shelves. I may want to borrow some of these. But thank you for joining us. Please watch for our upcoming email. We look forward to working with all of you on the remote phone banks to turn out the vote for the Supreme Court and hopefully to advocate for a fair and moral budget in the coming months. Thanks again and good night. If you have any further questions later on, don't hesitate to contact us.